The quiet one in Corridor 6, the shuttle drifted in silence, deep in neutral space. There were no stars outside, only a void thick enough to smother. On board, everything was sterile and still. The air purifiers hummed like distant insects. The diplomats, 16 species from across the galactic compact, spoke in murmurs and tight smiles. Tension clung to them like dust. They were waiting for war to end, or for it to begin again. And in the far back of the shuttle, in Corridor 6, sat a human. Alone. Ignored. His name was Ellis. He barely spoke. No one knew who assigned him here. He had no official badge, no diplomatic credentials, but he had been there since the beginning of the summit, seated quietly with a folded gray blanket on his lap, eyes half shut like he was listening to something distant. Not music, not voices, something else. They called him the Quiet One. They laughed when they said it, nervously. He's just a cultural observer, one of the Filari ambassadors once said. Harmless, like a pet. But others weren't so sure. The way the lights dimmed when he passed. The way security drones froze when he looked at them. The way he never ate, never slept, never aged. Rumors spread. Not out loud. Never out loud. Just small thoughts passed between antennae, whispered, through neural links. Maybe he wasn't fully human. Maybe he was one of those humans. The old kind. The ones from before. Then she arrived, Ambassador Threx of the Jakari Dominion. Tall, armored, coiled like a serpent ready to strike. He should not be here, she announced the moment she entered the central hall. Her voice made the walls tremble. Remove him, immediately. The room went silent. Even the AI paused. Why? Asked the Makari envoy, his gears grinding uneasily. You know why. Her eyes locked on Ellis, still seated calmly in the viewing corridor, watching the black outside like it whispered secrets only to him. His presence is an offense, a warning. I will not sit at any table with that thing present. Some agreed, others stayed silent, but no one moved to remove him, because no one dared. Later that night, Threx moved through the ship alone, her escort dismissed. She claimed to fear nothing. She entered Corridor 6, boots echoing too loud, too sharp. Ellis was still there, unmoving. She stood over him. What are you? He didn't answer. Answer me. He blinked slowly. You do not belong among higher minds, she hissed. Your species crawled out of fire and screams. Your instincts are violence. Your legacy is death. You should have burned out with your homeworld, your kind. He lifted his blanket and offered it to her. Not a word. Just that. Simple. Silent. A gesture no one could explain. She stared at it. At the soft folds of synthetic warmth, and then slowly she reached out. She touched it. Her hand recoiled instantly. She gasped. Something inside her moved. Something broke. What did you do? Her voice cracked. Ellis said nothing, but the walls of the corridor whispered now. Soft voices, old words. Her nose began to bleed. She turned, stumbled, ran. But it was too late. The whispers followed her. That night she sent a message to her dominion, urgent, rambling, half lost in static. He is one of them, the sealed ones. The ones we were warned of in the Black Age. I touched the fabric, and it remembered me. It saw my birth. It saw my death. It saw what we did to them. She was found the next morning in the cryobay, kneeling, motionless, eyes frozen open. Her mind, they said, was still active, but she would not speak, only weep. The Jakari withdrew from the summit. No reason given. Ellis did not move from his seat. But now, more began to whisper. The Lenari captain rerouted the ship's AI to avoid Sector 11F. The Keelan priestess began lighting saltfire candles outside his corridor. The Creole translator offered him fruit and bone beads without being asked. They said it was respect, but it smelled like fear. On the 7th day, the shuttle began to drift off course. Ellis finally stood up, and that was when the dreams began. The same dream for everyone on board. A hallway of black stone, a door that screamed when you touched it, and a voice behind it whispering, "You forgot what we are." The memory inside the fabric. The ship had changed. No alerts. No system malfunctions. No breach in the hull. And yet, it had changed. The walls were still smooth. The lights still hummed. The gravity field still held steady beneath alien feet. But the feeling was wrong. Something invisible curled through the corridors. A pressure, like hands just out of sight, always reaching. The Jakari ambassador still hadn't moved. 19 hours had passed since she touched the human's blanket and collapsed. Her body was alive, but her mind was somewhere else. Trapped, spiraling, lost in memory that didn't belong to her. Dr. Eisen of the Lanari medical cast stood over her frozen form. He whispered into his translator, trying to explain what he saw. His voice trembled. "Her neural map is rewriting itself," he said, "as if her brain believes it lived 100 different lives all at once. Thousands of emotions overlapping: grief, war, silence, love, rage, guilt, extinction." "This is impossible," another voice said from behind him. "That's not science. That's sorcery." But Eisen only shook his head. "No," he whispered. "That's history." Meanwhile, Ellis had returned to his seat in Corridor 6, his blanket folded neatly over his lap again. Unmoving, unreadable. The silence around him grew heavier with each hour. Ambassadors started avoiding that part of the ship. Some claimed the lights flickered when they passed near it. Others said they heard voices whispering in their own language, except no one was speaking. The Keelan priestess, old and scarred, was the only one who dared approach him now. She walked slowly, her breathing shallow, robes trailing behind her like torn wings. "You are a memory," she said to him. "Not a man. What are you doing here?" Ellis didn't respond. But for the first time since boarding the shuttle, he looked at her. His eyes were ancient. Too ancient. She took one step back and dropped her candle. It shattered, and in the brief moment of broken glass, the temperature dropped across the shuttle by 3 degrees. That night, 13 crew members recorded identical dreams. None of them had spoken to each other. None had known the others dreamed the same thing. The dream was this: a field of ash, a sky of fire, and a single human kneeling over a dying alien child, wrapping them in a gray blanket. When the blanket touched the child's skin, the stars went dark. No one spoke of it. But the shuttle's captain filed a silent emergency signal to the Galactic Compact. "Human anomaly on board. Unknown class. Requesting containment protocol Alpha Black." It was never received, because deep in the ship's core the AI had gone dark. Not offline, not broken, just silent. Ellis had walked past the AI terminal the day before. Now it simply refused to speak. No errors, no warnings. It simply refused, as if it was afraid. The Makari engineer team tried everything. Diagnostics, reboots, neural pings. Nothing worked. Then one of them, Tresh, the junior technician, touched the metal wall near the AI port and screamed. His scream echoed down every corridor. Systems spiked, lights burst. He clawed at his own skin. "It showed me what we did," he sobbed. "We burned them. We buried them in black moons. We lied about the war. We said they were monsters, but we were." He convulsed, fell. His last words: "The blanket remembers." After that, no one dared speak Ellis's name. But the whispers continued. Some said he wasn't just a survivor, not just a remnant. They said he was sent by those who had once ruled the void before the compact existed, before empires, before memory, a species wiped from every record, every archive, every mind, by force, by fire. And now one had returned, and he brought with him the last relic of their vengeance, a piece of woven memory, soft and gray, stitched with agony and wrath, the blanket. The next day, one of the envoys vanished. No alarm, no breach. His quarters were untouched, except for the walls. They were covered in drawings no one could explain, images of humans, thousands of them, standing before ancient alien thrones, eyes glowing with white fire, faces full of sorrow and fury. Above the drawings, one phrase repeated in hundreds of languages: "We only wanted to be left alone." The compact called for emergency lockdown. Ellis didn't move, but he no longer looked human. The way he sat, the weight of his silence, the way the air bent slightly around him, like reality had to adjust itself to his presence. On the 7th day, the ship stopped moving altogether, systems working, power steady. But the stars outside were gone, not blocked, not hidden, just missing. And somewhere deep in the belly of the shuttle, a door opened. A door no one remembered being there. Behind it, black stone steps, leading down, far below the ship's frame, beyond physics, beyond reason. The blanket fell from Ellis's lap and began to unfold itself, on its own. Like it remembered the path, like it was leading the way back to something ancient and terrible and unfinished. The door beneath the shuttle, there should not have been a door. Ships like the EOS Concorde weren't built with hidden chambers. It was an interstellar diplomatic vessel, a model of unity and transparency. Every corridor was mapped, every wall documented, every panel accounted for. But there it was, a black door where there should have been plating. At the end of corridor 6, no hinges, no key, just obsidian stone, pulsing softly, almost breathing. And behind it, a descent. The first to find it was the Creel Scout commander. She stared at it for 7 minutes before calling anyone. Not because she was afraid, but because her instincts, honed over generations of war and survival, told her something impossible. The door had not appeared. The ship had grown around it. By the time others arrived, the air near the door had changed. Colder, sharper, like breathing needles. Ellis stood in front of it now, still silent, but his posture had shifted, his head slightly tilted, listening, again, not to voices but to the memories bleeding through the door. The Keelan priestess gasped. She collapsed to her knees and whispered prayers to gods no one had heard of for 2,000 years. "He's not guarding it," she said. "He's remembering it." The blanket was no longer on his lap. It floated now, slowly, drifting in the air, near the door's edge, its fabric unraveling thread by thread, revealing something beneath it. Metal symbols, scorched glyphs, tiny patterns etched into every fiber, forming a map, a memory map. And at the center of the unraveling weave, a mark. A symbol banned in 13 empires, a single human handprint scorched black. The Jakari ambassador, still paralyzed, began to scream. No sound came out, but blood poured from her ears. And then, without a sound, the door opened. What lay beyond could not be measured in meters or mass. It was not a hallway, not a room. It was a space that had been forgotten, a descent built from stone that predated planets. Stairs too wide, angles too cruel, and walls carved with images too real, images that moved when no one looked. They didn't want to go in. But the door was pulling them, and Ellis walked forward without fear. The Creel commander followed first, then the Lenari doctor. Then others drawn by something deep inside them, curiosity, guilt, terror, or something older. They descended, one step, then another, and with every step, the shuttle faded above them, like the ship was never real, like this place had been waiting longer than any memory could hold. Down they went, deeper and deeper. The light from the blanket glowed dim now, flickering, pulsing in rhythm with their hearts. The walls were stories, ancient ones, stories carved in pain. They showed empires rising on the bones of innocence. They showed aliens laughing as human cities burned. They showed human soldiers dragged into laboratories, studied, dissected, erased, and then they showed the humans changing, becoming something else, something colder, something darker, something that couldn't die. They showed the creation of the blanket, not a cloth, but a living vessel, woven from the last thoughts of those who had been forgotten, soaked in vengeance, soaked in sorrow, a memory that could never fade. Ellis stopped walking. He turned to them. His eyes were wet, and for the first time he spoke. His voice was broken, soft, and endless. "We never wanted revenge," he said. "We just wanted to sleep." He reached out and touched the wall. Instantly, the glyphs ignited. Flames of memory roared across the stone, lighting up a massive chamber ahead. The diplomats fell to their knees, some screaming, some weeping. They saw the truth. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had sealed themselves away, to protect the galaxy, to protect themselves. Because what the wars had turned them into was something worse than monsters. It was the Creel commander who found the central altar. Black stone scorched with age. Upon it, a second blanket. Identical, untouched, folded neatly. Waiting, Ellis walked to it, placed his hand over the fabric, whispered something no translator could decode. And the second blanket breathed. Everyone in the chamber felt it, the stir of 1,000 human memories waking. And then, the wall behind them cracked, a fissure opened, and something stepped out. Not flesh, not metal, a shape, a presence, a memory given form. No eyes, no mouth, no limbs, just a suggestion of form. And grief so strong it bled into bone. One of the diplomats cried out, "What is that?" Ellis didn't answer. The shape moved toward him and knelt. The Creel commander stared in disbelief. "It's bowing to you." Ellis shook his head, his voice barely more than a breath. "It's apologizing." The air shifted, the stone groaned, and then the ceiling above them shattered, not from outside, from reality breaking. For a moment, the chamber was gone, and every soul in that stairwell saw a battlefield in space, thousands of years ago, ships shaped like nightmares. Stars imploding, screams without sound, and humans walking in silence through fire. They did not shout. They did not run. They only wrapped the dying in blankets and moved on. The visions faded. Ellis turned. His voice filled the chamber now. Not loud, not angry, just full of sorrow too deep to survive. "You forgot us," he said. "And now, we remember you." The second blanket unfolded itself and rose into the air, its fabric glowing. The air turned to ice, and the shuttle above, forgotten, empty, began to bleed starlight through its hull. And far across the galaxy in temples and command rooms, those who had hidden the past began to dream again. And this time, they could not wake. The ones who sealed the stars, they tried to deny. They tried to claim it was a sensor malfunction, a hallucination, a viral dream. But the nightmare had already spread across the Galactic Compact's core systems. Diplomats and officers began collapsing during meetings. Their eyes rolled back. Their skin turned pale. Some screamed. Others whispered words in dead human languages they'd never learned. The memory had awakened, and it was hungry. In the capital halls of the Falari High Congress, a seasoned admiral ripped out his own cybernetic link, screaming, "The fabric is watching me." On the drifting temples of the Veeri sun priests, sacred fires went black for the first time in 4,000 years. In deep space, a mining station orbiting a dead star sent one last transmission before it vanished. "We wrapped it in gray and left it behind, but now it's found us again." And still, the EO's Concorde drifted in silence. No one could reach it, because it wasn't where it should be anymore. The ship was gone from all tracking systems, its coordinates twisted into static, as if the void itself had claimed it. But inside, deep beneath the false steel of its decks, the ancient chamber breathed. Ellis knelt before the second blanket. It floated now, suspended between memory and matter, glowing with quiet sorrow. It pulsed not with energy, but emotion, pain, loss, betrayal. The diplomats stood in stunned silence. None dared speak. Even the Creel commander, hardened by 7 planetary wars, could not steady her breath. Then the chamber began to shift. The Walls retracted, the stairs unfolded, and the floor beneath them showed stars. Not the ones they knew, older ones. Dead stars? Stars that had been buried in time and erased from every map because they were the last places the true humans had been. Seen, and in the center of those stars a symbol flared to life, a glyph of mourning used by no known species except now. Everyone recognized it, as if it had always lived at the edge of their minds. Ellis stood. His voice came not from his throat, but from the chamber itself. You erased us to save yourselves. His eyes glowed faintly now. No longer human. Not fully. You told your children we were monsters. You called us destroyers, abominations. He turned slowly, looking at each alien in turn. But we were only defending what was ours. He held up his hand. A thin thread of the original blanket still clung to his fingers. This was made from the last breath of my sister. She died when your ships poisoned our skies, the Linari doctor whispered, shaking. We didn't know. We were told humans turned on the galaxy. Ellis's face was calm, but his voice burned. We did. After you came. The floor beneath them cracked. Through the split, images rose. Visions projected into their minds. They saw the first contact war. Not how the archives recorded it. Not a human attack, not unprovoked slaughter, but a slow invasion. Alien diplomats in human cities speaking words of peace, while sending viruses into air systems, mining the oceans, enslaving colonies under the guise of resource exchange. And when humans resisted, the galaxy called it aggression, so they retaliated. Together, a galactic effort to contain the threat. But humans didn't go quietly. They did not forgive, and they did not forget. So they created the blankets, woven from the neural strands of their dead, each one a vessel of memory. A curse made soft, a trap made warm. They left them behind, hidden, waiting, drifting in forgotten corners of space. Gifts, warnings, graves. And one day, one of them woke up. Ellis looked down at the second blanket, now unfolding further, and beneath it, something worse. A third. No one knew it was there. Not even Ellis. But the third blanket was not gray. It was red, stitched in fire, burning softly, and it pulsed with rage. Ellis stepped back, his eyes widened. This one wasn't ours, he whispered. The chamber trembled, walls cracked. The Creel commander drew her weapon, but it melted in her hands. What does that mean? She cried. The Keelan priestess clutched her robes. If it's not human, who made it? Ellis's voice dropped to a whisper. Someone else. Someone older. Someone who watched what we became and mourned it. The third blanket opened, and the stars screamed, all of them, simultaneously. The sound didn't come from outside. It came from within every living thing. A scream older than language, older than creation. The aliens collapsed, sobbing, howling, begging, and Ellis, the human who had been so quiet, so calm, dropped to his knees with tears streaming down his face, because the blanket spoke now, not in words, but in feelings, and what it shared was not revenge, not hatred. It shared grief, for what the galaxy could have been, for what they made the humans become, and for what must happen next. The chamber closed behind them. The ship was never found again. But days later, across the galaxy, blankets began appearing, folded, left at doorsteps. Temples, warships, thrones, each one with a single black handprint burned into it. No message, no threat, just a silent reminder. The dead remember, and the fabric of their pain will never be washed away. The cloth that remembers fire. The galaxy had never known silence like this. No wars, no broadcasts, no trade, no songs, just silence. Every major relay hub received the same encrypted pulse in the same hour. A file with no text, no image, just a corrupted waveform. When decoded, it played a sound. One breath. One heartbeat, and the soft rustle of fabric, folding itself. Millions heard it. And millions remembered something they'd never lived. Whole species fell to their knees. Soldiers broke formation. Kings abandoned their crowns. And then the blankets began to appear. Not just on doorsteps. Not just in temples. They appeared on corpses. Bodies that had been dead for years. Preserved, archived, catalogued. Suddenly, wrapped in soft gray, the Galactic Academy of Historical Warfare in Sector V8 reported a terrifying anomaly. Every specimen in its war museum, every enemy soldier ever kept as a display, was now veiled in human weave, and across it all, one symbol burned, the black handprint. Some called it a curse. Others began to pray, and in the void between stars, something watched. On board the long-lost Eos Concorde, no one had moved in days. The chamber of blankets had sealed itself in silence. Ellis sat at its center, eyes hollow, barely breathing. The red blanket, the one not of human origin, remained suspended above the altar, pulsing like a wound that refused to close. No one knew where it came from, but they all felt it. It wasn't just mourning the past. It was preparing for something worse. The Creel commander was the first to break. She began whispering to the walls. At first, nonsense. Then, fragments. Human words. Names that hadn't been spoken in 10,000 years. When they asked her who she was speaking to, she smiled wide, broken. "They're coming back," she whispered, "but not the way we remember." One by one, the others followed. Visions took them. Memories they'd never lived filled their minds. Some saw burning cities, human cities, quiet and beautiful, turned to ash by orbital weapons. Others saw children, wrapped gently in gray blankets, buried in silence while the stars watched and did nothing. One saw a single human floating in space, no suit, no shield, and yet alive, held together only by hate so strong it froze time. Ellis finally stood. His hands trembled. "I didn't ask for this," he whispered. No one answered, because the red blanket had unfolded itself completely now, and beneath it lay a void. Not a hole, not a tunnel, a place with no time, and something was waking inside it. Not human, not alien. Not even alive, just a concept. Retribution made flesh. Ellis turned to the others. His voice was soft, but carried weight like a collapsing star. "We were trying to forget, but they remembered." He stepped into the void beneath the red weave. Instantly the shuttle cracked. Above, in real space, the ship returned, appearing suddenly in its original coordinates, now surrounded by a massive emergency fleet from the Galactic Compact. But they couldn't approach. Every ship that got within range was wrapped, literally, by strands of fabric that grew from nothing, covering hulls like shrouds. The blankets moved like they were alive. Some ships opened fire. Their shots passed through the shuttle, as if it wasn't really there, and then, slowly, the blankets began wrapping those ships from the inside, crew by crew. Room by room. Not killing. Preserving. Freezing entire vessels in a silent museum of guilt. Back inside the shuttle, Ellis walked through the memory void. The others saw flashes of him, moving through time, through screams and stars, visiting every war crime the galaxy buried. He touched old battlefield ghosts. He whispered to extinct creatures, and with each step, he stitched the past together, not to fix it, but to make everyone feel it. Suddenly, the galaxy's most secure archive. Vault, the one that held forbidden history no species was allowed to see, cracked open. Across billions of systems, screens flickered and showed a single video. A human child, maybe 7 years old, holding a gray blanket and hiding in the ruins of a city. Sobbing. A voice behind the camera whispered, "Don't cry, little one. They'll come for you soon." Then fire fell from the sky. The screen went black. But the sound remained, the soft rustle of fabric, and then Every translator in the galaxy activated itself. One sentence, spoken by no one, heard by everyone. We remember everything. Back in the void, Ellis stood before something massive. Not a god, not a being, a consequence. It was shaped like loss. It bled the memories of every forgotten horror, and it bowed to him. Ellis whispered, "No, I'm not worthy," the consequence replied. "Not in sound, but in shared memory. You are what they made you." And it offered him a thread. Black. Endless. Burning cold. Ellis took it. The red blanket began to stitch itself into him, wrapping not his body but his soul. And for the first time, the universe felt something it hadn't felt in 50,000 years. Fear. We are what you buried. The stars had stopped speaking. All across the galactic compact, communication relays blinked red, not from failure, from fear. Languages didn't fail. They refused. The translation cores, the same neural systems used to bridge alien dialects for centuries, began shutting themselves down. Not from malware or sabotage, but from emotional overload. They couldn't handle what was being felt across the stars. Regret. Remorse. Recognition. Ellis had returned. But he wasn't walking anymore. He floated above the hull of the EO's Concorde, wrapped in layers of memory, gray and red threads trailing behind him like a comet of sorrow. His presence cracked the vacuum around him. It bent space like time itself didn't want to exist near him. The galactic fleet still orbited nearby. Dozens of warships ready to fire. They didn't. They couldn't. Because their targeting systems refused to lock onto him. Every ship's onboard AI had the same response. Target classified as grief entity. Engagement prohibited. Inside every bridge, officers stared at static. And in the static, they saw their own species' crimes reflected back at them. One by one, admirals collapsed. Not from attack. From memory. Their minds flooded with things they had never done, but their ancestors had. And the blankets. They remembered. From the depths of the ship, the red blanket's influence pulsed through subspace, threading itself into the compact's central data net. One thread per war crime. One stitch per lie. And slowly, history began to correct itself. Public records rewrote themselves. Monuments to victory cracked and revealed bones hidden inside. Textbooks reversed, showing how heroic first contact missions were actually invasions. And everywhere, the same phrase appeared, scratched into screens, burned into glass, whispered by radios. You made gods out of your monsters. In a high-orbit station above Veary Prime, the last surviving elder priest fell to her knees, weeping. They asked for peace, she cried. They begged us to leave them alone. Below her, the planet's capital flickered, its lights dimming, in perfect sync with the arrival of a single gray blanket that floated gently through the open atmosphere and landed on the steps of the Parliament. Where it touched the stone, the building aged 1,000 years and collapsed. Back on the EO's Concorde, the survivors in the memory chamber, now older, worn, sleepless, watched as Ellis descended again. He did not speak. He didn't have to. The red threads spun around him, like orbiting moons, and the air in the chamber turned thick, not with pressure, but with meaning. The Keelan priestess spoke first, tears in her voice. What are you now? Ellis looked down at his hands. His skin flickered. Gray, then red, then gray again. His voice, when it finally came, echoed from everywhere at once. I am not a man. He stepped forward. I am not vengeance. The chamber shook. I am the grief you chose not to feel. Outside the ship, every star within 10 light years dimmed. Ellis raised his hand, and from the void, the other blankets responded. Thousands. Millions. They had been hidden in deep vaults, lost ships, crashed colonies. Now they rose. Blankets once, mistaken as relics, souvenirs, even toys. Each carried the last memory of a forgotten human. And now, those memories had come home. Ellis began to sing. Not a melody, a language, one so old it had no form, just intention. The air rippled with it. Every species understood, not with their ears, but their bones. The song told of cities built on mercy, of alliances offered and rejected, of hands extended, then broken, of a decision made in silence, to leave the galaxy behind so it could live. But the galaxy came anyway. It took, and it buried what it feared. Ellis's song ended, and he whispered, "The final words. You don't get to forget us anymore." In that moment, something changed, not in ships or stars, but in hearts. A wave of memory crashed across the galaxy. Species who never met humans suddenly remembered them. Visions, voices, dreams, names, old human lullabies, quiet conversations in long extinct dialects, faces they had never seen, but somehow knew. Every living thing felt it. The presence of the dead. Not demanding, not punishing, just remembering, and asking to be remembered in return. The red blanket wrapped itself around Ellis. His form faded, not in death, but in legacy. He became the thread itself, a story woven into time. Across the galaxy, every blanket folded itself one last time, placed itself on the highest steps of every empire, and burned. No flame, no heat, just a soft final warmth, like the closing of ancient eyes, like forgiveness offered, but not forced. The EO's Concord was found centuries later, empty, preserved, untouched. Ellis was never seen again, but some say when war brews between stars, when leaders lie, when monuments to conquest rise too tall, a single gray blanket will appear, folded, waiting, with a handprint no one can wash away and a whisper in the silence. "We remember what you did. End."